the saying on the Temple of Delphi in for the Oracle back in the Greek times. Know thyself. Right? Is this before you come ask questions to the Oracle? Know yourself, and because then you will be able to ask the right questions. Because in the whole process of coaching, I believe the answers are within everyone. They're buried in there. You're either not asking yourself the right questions, or you're afraid to ask the right questions. And through that process, you'll discover what it is you want and the way to get there.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man Audley Stephenson, the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, coming to you from the sunny shores of the Jamaica West Indies. It's a true pleasure to be here, soaking in the warmth of the sun and the vibrant energy of this beautiful island. I'm grateful that you've chosen to spend part of your day with us as we embark on this journey towards living our best audacious lives. In today's episode, we'll delve into the essence of happiness and how it acts as a feedback mechanism from life. Just like the gentle waves that lap against the shore, happiness can guide us toward or away from our true selves. Recognizing our core values is crucial. It's like having a compass that points us in the right direction. By aligning our actions with these values, we empower ourselves to make conscious choices instead of falling into a victim mentality. Awareness is a key to this process, facilitating personal change and growth that leads to a more fulfilling life. Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Peter Teuscher, a remarkable coach and author of the thought-provoking book, Rethinking Happiness. Peter has dedicated his career to helping individuals navigate the complexities of happiness and urging them to find it really on their own terms. His journey from corporate life to coaching has equipped him with the unique insights that resonate deeply in our conversation. And so let's turn to our chat with Peter. It's absolutely thought-provoking, again, when we talk about happiness is, and we'll see him on the other side. Enjoy. Hey, Peter, thank you for joining me here today on the Audacious Living Podcast. It is such a pleasure, and thank you for making the time, my friend.
I'm really grateful, Audley, that you would have me on. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Same here as well. I think I say repeatedly after, during at the start of every, podcast conversation, how much I look forward to the opportunity to have a chance. And really think about, we now, Peter, you and I will sit and engage in a conversation, and we have a chance to positively impact someone's life who's eavesdropping or overhearing what we might say. And if they take one thing away from that, then puts them in a better place, I'm thrilled, right? And so it's a complete blessing to be able to engage in these types of dialogues. And again, thank you for helping me fulfill my mission, I'd say.
No, absolutely. I mean, and you're doing the same for me. So, and like I mentioned to you before, I started doing these conversations because I was hoping to promote my book, and because I thought the book would help people. But at the end of the day, I've done a number of these, and I really the feedback's been great. That wow, what you said really inspired me or whatever. And look, that's all both of us are trying to achieve, right?
That's it. You mentioned your book. Let's off the top. It's called Rethinking Happiness, and it really it sort of gets into again the complexities of happiness and really offers some insights and how individuals can go after it by their own means and their own terms, if you will. I wonder if maybe as a starting point, if you can sort of actually maybe a little about yourself, and let's get into the book as well.
Sure. Well, I guess I'll start with me. Like yourself, I'm from Canada originally. I grew up in Vancouver, and I built a small business with my brother. We sold it. I moved to Europe after backpacking through Asia for 6 months, which changed my life, and got into the corporate life, and then started bit by bit getting experience as a coach, and then I got certified, and slowly but surely built up that skill set, and so that now I do a lot of coaching, leadership training, and generally trying to help people, change their lives in a positive way. And that's what I strive to do in the book as well. I think happiness is kind of this this thing that gets people's attention. I don't look at happiness quite the same as a lot of other people. And in the book, I encourage people to define it for themselves. But in a time when in North America, depression and other, illnesses of despair, so to speak, are at an all-time high. I thought it's a very fitting time to be talking about this stuff. And so the way I look at happiness is I see it as this feedback that life gives us. So using your feelings as a guidance system, if you're living in alignment with your values and your deeper needs, or you are seeing your life through a clear perspective, that usually resonates back to you this happy feeling. And when you're not, you're feeling unhappy. When people work at a job where they have to do things that are not in alignment with their values,
Right.
they feel unhappy. And you can plug that into all different areas of life. And so in the book, I take a coaching approach. After every chapter except for one, I have a list of questions to help people reflect, because I give different perspectives on how you can look at your choice making, how you can look at yourself, how you can look at relationships. And I do that with the ultimate goal to make choices that are going to help you live a happier life, because happier means that, you're on track. I also believe that happy people make better choices, are better neighbors, better partners, better citizens. You tend to act in a more positive way when you're coming from this place of joy and happiness. So is that a good summary for you?
No, that's a fantastic summary. In fact, I love so much of the points that you made. I got excited as you're talking. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to talk about that, but the point. But I want to start on the fact that what we're doing is for our own terms. And you sort of talked about the choices that we make for ourselves, because so often in life, there are choices that we make, and some that we have to. Like, I mean, if it's work, for example, it's your job, it's sustaining you, it's giving you, it's providing you support, maybe you and your family. And so there's choices that are related to work that you kind of have to, because you're accountable with someone else, right? But even within those choices, you still have, in those situations, you still have choices that you can make. And so I want to certainly make that clear that you're not bound to this thing because you have to. You still can make that choice to be there or not, right? And again, that's a personal choice. But what I do sort of really, really appreciate is that the choices that you make are for me as an individual, because it's my own happiness that I'm taking responsible for.
Yes.
And if I can do that, and I'm comfortable with my choices, and they're feeding who I am, then I'm good, right?
Yeah, I love what you're saying there. And, choices are so important in helping us recognize our own power, because a lot of people fall into this, what I call the victim trap. It feels a lot more comfortable not to have to, take on this sense of blame. And it's never about blame. It's about taking responsibility and accountability for yourself and your own happiness. And when you can recognize these are the things I have the power to change, make choices there. The other stuff, just leave it alone. But even those things where you say it's obligation because I've got to go to work, I've got to support my family.
Right.
If you can look at them through the lens of I choose to go, right? Because the consequences, I don't want to have to deal with those consequences. And then it feels more empowering. If you say, I look at things in terms of I can, I want to, and I will, right? So do I have the ability? Do I have the desire? And will I make the commitment, right? Those are the ways I try and look at things.
Yeah.
And so when you say, I have to go to work, that feels like such a burden. But when you say, I want to go, because even though I may not love my job, I know that the results are, I get the paycheck, I support my family that I love, or it allows me to do these other things. I think life is always about, the perspective from which you want to look at it.
Absolutely.
So that's what I encourage people to do. Even those are things that you're doing as a means to an end. If you can recognize that you've still made that choice, it feels way more empowering, right?
Yeah. In the work context example, and I like to say I get to go. Like it's a privilege, right? But again, if you see where this decision, how it's supporting a bigger vision, then then you can be comfortable and happy with those choices. The other part about this conversation that I'm really big on, and I get excited for people when they make those choices for themselves that support their happiness, regardless, if it flies in the face of what everyone else thinks, no one else supports it, they don't believe it, they're still consciously making that choice themselves. And that, Peter, isn't an easy thing to do. At
No.
times, it can be very, very challenging to make the choices for you. You might be disappointing people, you might be angering people, but it's your own personal choice.
It is, and I think that's part of the thing that gets people off track in terms of trying to figure out what happiness means to them and then experiencing more of it. Because I'll have people that come to me and say, look, I did all these things that I studied, I got a degree, and I went to, I got a career, and maybe they have a family and kids, and they've done all these things, and then they come to me and say, I'm still not happy. And part of the issue is, well, I've checked all these boxes that society said would lead to my happiness,
Right.
and it hasn't done so. So that's why I don't think happiness is this box checking exercise or this, well, this is what the best marketeers tell me happiness looks like. It's everybody needs to discover it for themselves. And when you do,
Yes.
when you find that authentic happiness and that way of achieving it, you're going to feel a lot better. And a lot of times people will say you see happiness as these peak moments in life, this great vacation or this big success that they have, and everything in between that, treat it like filler. And I think that's such a wasted opportunity. There's so many opportunities for joy
Yeah.
and happiness in every moment. And I think when you can start seeing it that way, it really adjusts your attitude towards life in a big way.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, because I know how difficult of a decision that can be, right? To make that choice. I really, truly, I have a profound level of respect for those individuals. I remember once, I'll tell you a personal story. I remember once, it was a young woman I met. We were in a relationship. We were kind of coming together at two different points of our lives. She was sort of coming out of the situation. I was sort of just, similar as well. And she had gone to the point that she realized that she still needed to do some work for herself. She had to kind of figure out her own happiness and figure out her own where I need to be, and sort of I'll steal a line, rethink her place, if you will. I'll steal a line from you in that regard, right? Rethink where she fit in that. And part of that process meant stepping away from what we were trying to establish. And and in the moment I'm like, oh my gosh, but I get it, and you can't help but respect that, because if you're not happy within yourself, then you're not happy with any context of any type of relationship at all, right? And so I mean, was it a hard lesson? Absolutely, but at the same time, it was an important one to remember, and that's why I will. If someone can say to me that, Audley, I consciously thought through my options, I constantly evaluated my situation, and I made this decision because I knew it was right for me. Bravo. Like, honestly, bravo. Forget everything else. Forget anyone else that you made disappointing and let down. Good for you. And that's kind of how I feel on that.
Yeah, making those conscious choices, right? Raising your level of awareness and making conscious choices instead of being, pushed or pulled or influenced externally. I think that's such an important point. And what you said right before you, thanks for sharing that story, by the way, because I think that's so important. If you can be the best version of yourself, or you work to be a better version of yourself, you will be better in relationships. So I think that took a lot of awareness. The other thing where you said, you respect people because it can be hard to make those decisions.
Sure.
I really like to add the caveat that, all these things that you and I are talking about, they're not necessarily easy, right?
Right.
But every step you take towards it's worth it, right? So, my wife will say to me too, I heard you say this on this podcast, but you don't always do that. It's like, yeah, I'm working towards it. I don't claim to be perfect. I am not some guru who's mastered life, but I've figured out a lot of things that have improved my life immensely. And so I want to give that further as I continue to grow and learn myself. Right. So I don't want to give anyone the impression, oh, this is just easy stuff. Right.
Right.
It takes
Fantastic
work.
point. No, fantastic point. It's funny. I've built this whole I don't know, brand, whatever, on this audaciousness theme, right? And how I want to live my life. Are there times where I'm not totally audacious? Absolutely. There's times where I'm like second guessing myself. There's times like I don't know what I'm doing. There's times where I'm scared. So no, you're right. We're all going through this, but I do love the fact that it's a constant process. And for me, it is a constant reminder. And I've got tattooed on my forearm, live life audaciously, right? And because this is truly what I believe and support in. But there's times where it's difficult. There's times where it's challenging. And so maybe I'll put to you then, in those moments where we have those challenges and difficulties, so we're searching for our happiness and we're not doing what fulfills us. What do you suggest, or how do we approach those situations?
Well, there's a couple of different things you can do. There's different rituals that I implement in my life, morning rituals, evening, or different habits. But the thing that I've identified that has most changed my life, because I come from a background where, I was really struggling with depression, and I turned like the where I am now to where I was, 25 years ago. You wouldn't even recognize me anymore. And so, but what I fundamentally realized changed my life was changing the beliefs that I have and the sort of habitual way of thinking. And so when I took control of those things, that allowed me to live a happier life, make better choices, be more self-aware, and all of those things contribute to, when you're self-aware, you can start to recognize these things that these things you're putting in your own way, these choices that you're making that aren't in alignment with, what you really want. And I think when you can recognize those things, you can start to make better choices. But one of the things that I find, I talked about the habitual way of thinking. So repetitive thought is it's a real big part of changing your mindset and being able to experience life in a happier way. And so we all have, thousands of thoughts every day. The researchers, they talk about anywhere from 60 to 80,000 thoughts we have in a day, and most of them are negative, right? So if you can recognize it in yourself, negative self-talk, complaining about the outside world, judgments, all this kind of stuff, and then ask yourself, is this improving my life? I'm very pragmatic that way, does this belief I have, does it serve me, or is it not useful? Are these thoughts that I think, are they supporting me? Are they, helping me achieve my own highest potential?
Right.
And when you can do an inventory like that, and one great exercise for doing that is putting it down on paper. So just journaling on a regular basis can be, when you read it back and you go, wow, these are my thoughts. And then you recognize, I don't really believe this stuff, or this isn't helping me at all, right? And then you can start to take steps to change that.
Yeah, I love the idea of just sort of taking a step back and sort of analyzing our thoughts and the process of seeing if it's in alignment with who we want to be. I think it's a good exercise to go through. I want to talk about self-awareness. You mentioned earlier, and I think I'd like to think that's a starting point for any kind of significant change in our lives. And I oftentimes use an analogy when I talk about self-awareness. So I'll give you an image of a living room. Okay. And in your living room, you've got your TV, you've got your sofa, you've got your coffee table, you've got a lamp. Okay. Now, if you walked into that room and the light was turned completely off and it was dark, the furniture's still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. But when you turn that switch on, all of a sudden you'll see that furniture. The light didn't put the furniture there. The furniture was already there. The light was that light bulb was at an awareness piece. And so and why I think it's a very, very relevant analogy is the things were always there. They're always part of us. They always form who we are. We just didn't see them.
Yeah, I love that analogy. I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'm gonna use that one in the future.
It's yours.
But one of my coaching mottos is awareness allows change, right? Because it's just so true. We have most of the things that the beliefs and strategies we're operating on are below the level of our awareness. And so until we can bring them up to the surface and have a look at them, especially where it comes to fears, because fears tend to sort of linger in the background, they're in the periphery, but when we look at them, they're never as big or as daunting as we thought when they were just kind of in the background.
Right.
But
don't you love that, by the way? Don't you love that, by the way? Don't you love the fact that our fears drive us, all this kind of, no, we can't do it, and then we get there like, oh, that wasn't that bad.
Exactly. So that's so important. So the awareness piece is great, and also because a lot of times the things we think we want, that's something that comes out of a lot of coaching conversations. People go, listen, I want to achieve this goal and help me get there. And then through the process, we realize actually that's not really what they wanted in the first place. They wanted something different. And so, but it takes it takes that investigation into yourself. And a lot of times doing it with a coach or with someone that you trust helps a lot. But just, as it says that, the saying on the Temple of Delphi in for the Oracle back in the Greek times, know thyself, right? Is this before you come ask questions to the Oracle, know yourself, and because then you will be able to ask the right questions. Because in the whole process of coaching, I believe the answers are within everyone. They're buried in there. You're either not asking yourself the right questions or you're afraid to ask the right questions. And through that process, you'll discover what it is you want and the way to get there. So knowing yourself is such a key piece of that. And then and then listening to those inner signals that are going to tell you and help you, because sometimes we don't trust ourselves. We don't trust those inner signals, right? So it's this whole relationship with yourself. And I guess really quick to go back to something else you were talking about before when you're saying, we do this for ourselves. And I love to use the whole analogy of in the airplane, they always say, in the case of loss of cabin pressure, always apply your mask first and then help those around you, even small children. Because look, if you're not getting yourself to a good place, or ideally to the best form of you that you can, you won't be that much good to anyone else. I think that unhappy people, miserable people tend to be the most selfish people. Whereas people who are really giving and, they tend to be a lot happier and have more to give in a positive way. So, I'm a systemic coach. I look at everything as having different components that all affect each other, and there's relationships between them. And so that's why I look at different components, and that's also why in the book I don't just talk about here's the steps that you take. There's no formula, right? There's some principles in there, and there's all different areas of your life that you can look at from different angles, and that's my systemic approach to it.
I love it. For me, a big part of happiness, and it ties into the know thyself sort of thing, is knowing the things that motivate you, that excite you, that you get you jumping out of bed. And I think why that's so important is when you're going through life's challenges, and we're going to get obstacles, we're going to have all sorts of things that are thrown at us. I tend to, I notice with myself that if I can find a way to stay close to those things, I know will give me automatic joy. There's just some things that will just give you that boost regardless of what you're going through. So the closer you can get to those things, the quicker you're able to bounce back. So I think it supports your overall resilience. But there is some work to sort of figuring out what those things are. And I think if you can identify, and I think everyone, we know the 3 or 4 things that can do that for us that aren't harmful. Like, I mean, I like chocolate cake, but I know I can't overindulge because that's not going to be good for me. But at the same time, there are things that I can indulge in that will naturally boost me. And I think and that's a big part of knowing thyself. Is that a fair sort of take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I like the way that Tony Robbins talks about it. He talks about your story, your state, and your strategies. I think when you recognize, first of all, the state that you're in, right? That's a really big one. Am I in a good frame of mind to make choices in this moment? The whole part about your story is a lot of the beliefs that you've developed, from a lifetime that you things that you've maybe limited yourself, or things that have kind of skewed the way you see the world, and then your strategies come from those beliefs, right? So that's understanding that those 3 things about yourself are really, really important. And getting what you're talking about, having the cake or doing that, those things can affect your state. And I'm not I believe in authentic happiness, but I'm not against pleasure. Like, I just don't think pleasure is necessarily the thing that's going to make you happy. My nephew, when he was a kid playing Xbox, he said, when I play my Xbox, I just feel happy, And stupid me, I said to him, I was trying to explain the neurological, the chemical effects of that video game and the dopamine release. You can't tell a kid that's why it's not real happiness. But anyway, I've learned a lot since then. But that's the thing, it's not just this pleasure seeking. That's always going to be fleeting. But when you find authentic happiness, you will know it, right? You'll find pleasure in just the simplest things, right? Because it's in resonance with who the authentic part of yourself. Going back to knowing
Yep.
knowing yourself better. And one key thing that I like to do with people to help them know themselves better is to recognize their values, right? A lot of people haven't done the work or to identify these are the core values that I have. We have lots of different values, and over a lifetime, we may have different emphasis on some values than on others. Like when we're younger, we may really cherish freedom and that autonomy. And when we get older, we may have an emphasis on security, right? So yes, two kind of contrary, maybe, you might see them as contrary. They don't need to be, but they're both your values. It's just you have a different emphasis at a different phase of your life. But going through and doing the work to recognize what your core values are is really important, because your values drive your behaviors. They really are the things. When you pay attention to them, you'll get that feedback that you're living in alignment with what your needs and wants are in life. So that's something I really encourage people to do.
I'll share. I'm a big basketball guy, and I
Me
find
too.
lots of enjoyment of that. I think you coach as well. You do some coaching.
I used to coach high school back in Vancouver. Yeah.
And so, basketball has been always one of those things that brought me joy, and I've always loved the game and playing it and being around, and I had an opportunity to work in it as well. And so it's been good to me overall. My three children all got involved in the game at certain different levels, and my son, his youngest, he probably played the longest out of the three, and he recently, and so he's played on teams, and I've coached him, and I found that way to sort of, I've been involved. I coach him directly. I coach on the sidelines. I coach on the car ride after the game when you have a rough outing. I've done all that kind of stuff. And in his last year of high school, I think they couldn't find a coach, so he said, "Hey, Dad, will you coach my team at school for me?" kind of a thing. And I did that. And what was really nice is, so I had this experience coaching again, which isn't new to me. And the following year, lo and behold, my son ends up taking over that team to coach his former high school team. And I'm his assistant coach. And so talk about this thing that gives you this happiness, thing that gives you this boost, the thing that gives you this joy. Like the way it ripples in other areas of my life. So even now I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh my God, I've got goosebumps, because it's such a cool experience to stand on the sidelines with my son coaching a game, right? And so it's these positive ripples that come out of our lives. And you alluded to that earlier, when you sort of talked about how, it can help your relationships and other aspects of your lives. It truly, truly does. And that's why I think it's worthwhile investing, doing that work, because it can have, enormous impacts.
Yeah, and doing the work is interesting, because people see work as, sometimes a grind, a struggle, or whatever. I think it's important to recognize that, this pursuit, or this trying to find more moments of happiness, there is some work involved. And I really love the work of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Don't ask me to spell it, really difficult name, but he's the American-Hungarian psychologist who wrote the book on flow, right? And he talks about this combination of things that make you happy and things that challenge you, right? So it's something that you find pleasurable or you find really engaging, but is also challenging, so you're not getting bored. And the combination of those two things are what get you in that flow state, whether it's as an athlete or in some kind of work that you do. And so, being a coach, for a sports, at whatever level, it takes a level of commitment. It's not always easy. You sacrifice other things, but in the end, it's worth it. And that, to me, kind of sums it up. It's you can, and having played the game, but even when you're coaching on the sidelines, you can really get in the flow of because it's a complex game. There's lots of variable parts. Things are happening all the time, but this satisfaction you get out of it, you can't buy that with money, right?
No,
and I think, everything we're talking about here, it doesn't, you can't put it in a dictionary. It's really pointing to some truth about what it is, right? So I think that's a really important truth about happiness. Really comes from these things that you pursue, that you from on a deeper level you find worthwhile, even if they're difficult, even if they're challenging, right? It's not sitting on the beach and drinking umbrella
Right,
drinks,
right,
right?
right, right,
That
right. I
that's
mean,
not the happiness we're
yeah,
talking about.
no, it's not. I mean, it could be elements of it, but that's not what we're really talking and focusing on.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
like that. And I do like the idea of exploring to find whether it be challenging or you're looking for new things, because there could be happiness around the corner. You don't even know it's there if you haven't looked,
Yeah.
right? So that's another part that I think is really fascinating.
Yeah, being curious, I think is like
Oh, I
for
love it.
me, that's a
Great
really
word. Great word.
important element to stay curious and to be. That's whole part of this learning journey, right? If you're not curious, you won't go out and look for new experiences, new things. And part of the systemic approach to solving problems is not because when you reduce things down to their simplest parts,
Yep.
that's that reductionist way of doing things. That's great if you're rebuilding a car engine, but life is complex and has lots of these, and so there's no real easy way to say, well, if I do this, this will happen. A lot of times you just need to make experiments in life, and that's how you will find the answers, because there are so many different moving parts that there's
Yes.
no clear straight line that's going to get you there, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. All that we're talking about, and I love it because we haven't used the A word. We haven't said authenticity at all. But all of what we're talking about is pointing in that direction. It allows us to sort of, live this authentic life. And I think if that's your starting point, if you're living authentically and doing the things that you're supposed to, or that you're meant to, rather, as opposed to supposed to, doing things that you're meant to, that give you that, whether it be clarity or happiness or joy, I think that's really part of this audacious living that we're talking about.
Yeah. And then we go back to the whole thing that you pointed out before about knowing yourself, right? Getting to know yourself, bringing a lot of those things to the surface that that are buried or that you haven't given any attention to. And the better you know yourself, the more authentically you can live. And then you bring in the piece about values, because then once you recognize those values, you can live in alignment with them. Then you're living an authentic life. So
Yeah.
it's about all these different pieces that you're trying to put together, right?
Can we just talk about values for a bit? Because I do think that's
Sure.
something that oftentimes is forgotten, and maybe it's just assumed like they're just there. We don't really think about our values. We don't think about maybe how our values can change. We don't think of how they can be influenced or informed and brought to another level, if you will. But I think those are, and it's which is nice about that is it's in line with change. And life is constant evolution. So change is right. So why can't our values change with more information or insight or experiences? But they do, to me, our values are almost like an operating system, right? Like this is a starting
Yeah.
point and we kind of move from there. Is that on track, you think?
Well, the psychological literature says that our values are with us from a very young age. So it's not necessarily that they change, but it may seem like that because you emphasize different values
Hmm.
as you progress through life. So, but that's why it's so critical to look at what your core values are currently, because we have lots of values. There's things we value, but we don't live every day, or there's things that we value that don't affect us as emotionally as others do, right? So if honesty is a really high core value for you, and you live a life where you don't feel you can always be honest, then you're going to feel unhappy, because those two things are in contrast, right? So the values piece is really important, because they'll really guide you in a good way if you let them, but it takes a level of awareness first and foremost. But where I do absolutely agree with you is through life, you have, it seems like your values have changed, but your emphasis on different values has evolved. And I think that's the way to look at it from my
Got you.
perspective.
And I think I don't want to love to get your thoughts on this, but even our actual actions. So, for example, if I value being charitable or helping others, let's say, right,
Yeah.
what I actually can do can appear in different ways. Maybe it's simply just writing a check and giving people money, or maybe it's giving my time. But and both are. There's no right or wrong here. It's just how it materializes and what it looks like in the end. But behind those actions are still that backdrop of these values of me like to help out others, and what that looks like, it could just be different in different forms.
Yeah, exactly. So, to be clear, values can be anything. We talked about authenticity, honesty, but hard work and ambition can be values. A sense of community, family, those can all be values. So there are literally hundreds or thousands of values that you could define. And so trying to figure out exactly which are your core ones, can be, challenging. And not everyone is going to have those same, priorities as you. And so that's something that you find in relationships. If people have just really differing values, it makes it difficult to find that connection, right? You don't have to have identical ones, but you have to have some that are in alignment. So that's a piece to be aware of in relationships. And for people wondering, how do I figure out what my core values are, or what the core values that I currently emphasize in my life? There are different exercises online. You can do these automated things, but there's a couple of really easy exercises that they're easy in terms that you don't need much to do them. You can take a blank piece of paper and write down as many values as you can come up with. Try and come up with like 50, 60, 100 if you can. And then start striking off the ones that you could live without. And then once it starts getting really hard, then you're getting close, right? If you're getting down to 10 and it's like, oh, I don't know if I have to give up one of these, it's really, really hard. Then you're getting at the core, right? You can do the same with Post-it notes, writing them on Post-it notes and slowly taking them off until it's like, I don't want to take this one off, right? And that because then when you live by that feeling, that sense of, oh no, I can't do that, you have that aversion to it, then that's one of my core values. So that's a kind of a simple exercise. It's not easy because it does take some, you grapple with your emotions while you're doing it, but that's something I really recognize people do for themselves.
It's a good point. Definitely a good point. A good exercise to go through. I might even give that a shot myself and see which sticky notes I want to rip down. We'll see. I'm guessing it's gonna be all of them. I'm not. No, don't touch them. Leave them all. Hey, that's gonna be
that's the hard part about it, right?
Absolutely. Last, I want to touch on, Peter, you mentioned the work that you do with leaders, right? And what I believe, and you can sort of tell me if I'm way off on this or not, that a lot of times the conversation of leaders and their happiness don't always happen at the same time, right? Leaders have a job, and this is what they're supposed to do, and they're not there to be happy. They're there to, carry out the work and lead the people and get all that stuff. But there is some relevancy to leadership and happiness, as I'm sure you can speak to.
Yeah, I think people that show up at work every day, sort of in alignment with their values and everything, they tend to be fairly happy. And don't you find that when you meet happy people, like people gravitate towards them, right? So I think it's getting yourself in that state of regularly experiencing happiness. And again, it's not. I don't think that anyone can be permanently happy every minute of the day, right? No. There's always going to be contrast in life, but the more moments, because happiness is in the moment, so the more moments of happiness. But as it relates to leaders, as I pointed out before, I think some of the most selfish people in the world are unhappy people, right? And so if you have selfish leaders, it's really difficult to be a person that people are willing to follow. You have managers that feel that that's their role is to discipline and to be controlling or whatever, but those aren't really leaders. Leaders are people that say, I'm going to follow that person, right? I believe that vision they have and where they're going, and I'm going to follow them out of my own volition. And trying to motivate that in people is not easy, right?
Right.
So,
right.
But if you come from a mindset and a place of joy and happiness, you will be a better leader naturally, because you'll make better decisions and you'll be more compassionate to the people around you. And all of those are important leadership skills. So to answer your question, yes, I think happiness plays an important role.
And it leads to all what you're saying. It points in the direction of like a positive organizational culture. And when you've got that and now you've created an opportunity for your organization to do all sorts of spectacular things, right? Once you've got that positive culture, that serves as a foundation. So that's pretty awesome, man. Pretty awesome.
Yeah, and I think positivity and all those things are great. I think optimism is really important, but I don't want people to think it's we only look at the good stuff and put your head in the sand, and we don't want to look at the bad stuff. It's you can see the bad stuff, but how you respond and react to it is, when you're coming from a happy place, and when you're coming from that positive place, you don't see problems, you see challenges, and you galvanize people together to overcome them, right? That's the difference. And so when you have that sort of core sense of happiness within yourself, I think that you will be able to, execute that in the workplace. You'll be able to live that example, but you'll also inspire others to live the same way.
I love it. Peter, this has been great, man. I've had a ball of fun with you, man. Like in terms of just the happiness dialogue and what that can do for people. And again, I'll go back to one of the points you made off the top, and it just serves as a wonderful foundation for so many other great things in your lives, whether it be through your relationships or your careers or even just how you interact with the rest of society. I think it's just a wonderful thing. And so I really want to thank you again for sort of underscoring that, the importance of that. I think of like the way I think about it is, and we've all experienced it. You walk in an elevator and you see someone smiling. How do you not smile? Like, how are you not happy, right? When you have that experience, and then someone else comes, everyone's smiling at the elevator. Just you feel this mood, this atmosphere, this electricity, and so I think we each have the opportunity to do that just by looking after ourselves as a starting point. And that, again, that will serve as a foundation. So thank you for sharing that. For listeners that wanted to connect with you, learn more about you, you've got a podcast as well. You do all kind of great stuff. Where could we send them, Peter?
The best place is to look up our website. It's peterteuscher.com, and the last name is spelled Teuscher. So peterteuscher.com. You can get a link to my book. You can read my blog. I write a weekly blog. So if anything we've talked about, it's probably shown up in my blog somewhere. And certainly if anybody wants any coaching, they can reach out to me. I do that virtually for people internationally. So yeah. And look, thank you so much for what you're doing here, but also for giving me the opportunity to share.
No, this has been a complete pleasure. Thank you, Peter. All the best, and I appreciate you for being a guest on the Audacious Living Podcast.
Thanks so much.
Back we are here on the podcast. In our conversation with Peter, part of our discussion, we explore the nuances of happiness and how it serves as a vital feedback mechanism in our lives. One of the key points we touch upon is the importance of making conscious choices that reflect our true values, allowing us to live authentically. I especially loved how Peter's perspective on how happiness is not merely a destination, but an ongoing journey of self-discovery and alignment with one's core principles. I encourage you to connect with Peter directly. Of course, his website is peterteuscher.com. It's filled with resources that can help you on your path to personal growth, and you'll find all his contact details in the show notes below. Additionally, be sure to check out any special offers he has for listeners, which could provide you with valuable tools for your own journey. As you wrap up today's episode, I want to thank you for joining me on this adventure towards audacious living. If you've enjoyed a conversation, please take a moment to like, follow, subscribe, or share the podcast. Your support helps us grow and reach even more people who are ready to live their best audacious lives. Until next time, I'm encouraging you to keep embracing your potential, living authentically. Remember that life is too short to live any other way. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stephenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.